Morning. A coffee shop. A group of people chatting enthusiastically. At the center of it all, a quiet man. He doesn't interrupt, doesn't try to tell stories or impress anyone. He simply sits, listens, takes it in, observes. And then, when asked for his opinion, he says a few brief words. The whole table falls silent. Not because he speaks loudly, but because every word he utters carries weight. In a world where everyone rushes to express themselves, constantly posting, constantly explaining, silence becomes something strange, almost unsettling. But that's precisely what makes it valuable. Silence is not weakness, it is a strategy, a way to conserve energy, sharpen resilience, and reclaim sovereignty over our own minds. Today, we'll explore that quiet power together, the strategy no one talks about, yet the strongest among us quietly live by. 1. Strength lies not in volume, but in presence. There is a simple truth often overlooked. The most influential person in a room is not the one who speaks the most, nor the one who draws every eye with loudness or showy gestures. It is often the quiet one, the one who sits with calm composure, who doesn't interrupt, doesn't rush to insert opinions to assert themselves. They are present steadily, silently, and powerfully. And that is what creates true influence. Not because they speak well, but because they know when to speak. Not because they show off, but because they have nothing to prove. In an age where people seem determined to fill every space with sound words, notifications, news feeds, podcasts, social posts, silence, composure, and firm presence have become almost foreign. Yet, that is precisely what makes them powerful. When everyone tries to be heard, the one who listens stands out. When everyone reacts instantly, the one who waits before speaking earns respect. Presence doesn't come from what you do to be seen. It comes from who you are when you stop trying to be recognized. Some enter a room unnoticed. Others, by merely sitting still, radiate a quiet energy that's felt. They don't need to speak to command respect. Their composure and self-mastery already signal they're worth listening to. That's not withdrawal. It's confidence that doesn't need noise to exist. The one with true presence is not swayed by circumstance. They are not pulled into outer chaos. They don't let emotion override reason. They don't speak simply because they feel they must. They choose, they wait, they act when it truly matters. And when they speak, each word carries weight. Because they've heard enough, understood enough, and thought enough for their words to matter. Not many, not ornate, not long, just timely, precise, and meaningful. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Let your composure be your strongest protest." That applies not only to conflict or confrontation, but to every daily interaction. That calm arises from not being driven by the need for validation. You don't have to ramble to feel important. You're not deceived by the illusion that more words mean more wisdom or strength. On the contrary, you know that true depth comes with simplicity. What matters most is rarely spoken, it's felt through the energy a person carries. When you cultivate quiet presence, you build a kind of influence that cannot be imitated. Not the kind that grabs the mic, but the kind that knows when it isn't needed. You don't have to demand attention, others will come to you, drawn to your steadiness, clarity, and unshakable calm. And, as a natural reflex, when someone like that finally speaks, the whole room falls silent. Not because they shouted, but because everyone knows that when they speak, something worth hearing is about to be said. Ultimately, the presence you build isn't found in what you say to the world, but in what you've said to yourself beforehand. A person with clarity within Discipline over emotion, and the habit of observation over reaction carries with them a quiet kind of strength. They do not seek attention. And that very lack of need makes others pay attention, because in a world that is loud and rushed, what stops people in their tracks is rarely a shout, but an unusual silence, profound, grounded, and unforgettable. 2. When words become leaks of strength. We grow up in a world that encourages us to say everything. From fleeting thoughts to half-formed emotions to vague plans, everything is shared, posted, declared. Social media turns speaking out into a default habit. Every goal becomes a caption, every small milestone becomes a reason to narrate. And we don't realize that this is where our strength quietly leaks away. Each time you speak something that is unfinished, uncertain, or not yet forged through action, you drain energy that should have been reserved for doing. When you share a plan that's still just an idea, your brain, according to psychology research, releases a premature reward. You feel as though you've moved closer to the goal, when in truth, you haven't moved at all. That false sense of satisfaction lowers your real motivation. You've tasted victory without ever having fought, and by the time it's time to act, the fire has already dimmed. It's not just about weakening resolve. Speaking too early also scatters focus. When you announce a plan, even a deeply personal one, you open the door to opinions, responses, even doubts from others. A careless comment can throw you off balance. A simple question can make you question yourself. Stoics don't reject listening, but they are rigorous in filtering what enters the mind. They understand that not every voice deserves to be heard, and not everything must be spoken. Moreover, over-speaking burns a resource more precious than time: attention. Every time you speak, you direct your attention toward it and unconsciously pull others' attention along. If what you share is premature, you not only waste your own focus, but also disperse the energy around you. This explains why many people feel busy, yet produce so little. They spend energy telling instead of doing. Silence isn't retreat. It's the active choice to protect what is still forming. Just as a blacksmith doesn't flaunt the blade while it's still red hot, the disciplined person doesn't reveal what's still incomplete. They know that every early declaration invites expectation, both from others and from the self. And expectation, if it arrives too soon, becomes a burden that makes each step heavier and less free. The Stoic chooses to keep strength inward until it's solid enough to stand under scrutiny. They speak less, but do more. They let outcomes speak, not applause. Because they know, the more you explain, the easier it is to be misunderstood. The harder you try to be accepted, the easier it is to lose yourself. And the more you speak of uncertain things, the more likely you are to betray yourself when you cannot follow through. True strength isn't measured by how much you can say, but by how much you can withhold. Not to hide, but to nurture. Not out of fear, but out of respect for the path you're walking. When you learn to stay silent, you begin to store power. Each time you choose not to tell, you allow your actions to develop free of outside pressure. And when the time comes, those actions will carry a weight of their own, needing no introduction. In the end, what is most formidable isn't the one who is silent because they have nothing to say, but the one who is silent because they know exactly when to speak. They are not driven by the need to be seen or validated. They don't react just to prove they exist. They choose action over explanation, preparation over performance. And when they finally speak, the world has no choice but to listen. Not because they speak loudly, but because their words have been steeped in power, and power never needs to shout to be real. 3. Action needs no explanation. There is a habit deeply rooted in modern life. Before doing anything, people often feel the need to announce it. Before acting, they feel the need to explain. Before starting, they feel the need to justify. But true action requires no commentary. It doesn't need to be exposed to hold value. It only needs to be done fully, deliberately, and without dependence on others' approval. Disciplined individuals don't act for praise, don't begin to impress, and don't need applause to stay on track. They act simply because it's what must be done. In Stoic thought, a good action is one that arises from reason, not impulse. It is free from emotional compulsion, independent of external expectations, and doesn't require the outside validation to carry meaning. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "A bee does not boast of making honey. It simply does the work." So should we. The more someone feels the need to explain everything they do, the more it reveals their inner uncertainty. They seek affirmation because they're still unsure within. But when you are clear about your reason, firm in your goal, and committed to yourself, you no longer feel the need to say much. You simply act. In the digital world, where people easily declare every step, every small change in their personal journey, silence becomes a brave choice. Not because you have nothing to share, but because you choose to reserve your energy for something more important: execution. The difference between doers and talkers lies in consistency. Those who truly act don't need to convince others of their seriousness. They simply persist quietly and steadily. And when the results arrive, they speak louder than any post or declaration ever could. Acting without explanation is also how you protect your values from scattering. Each time you pause to explain why you chose this path, why you shifted direction, or why results haven't shown yet, you pull yourself out of the process to appease others. And in that moment, you lose focus. You begin to let others enter an inner journey that should have remained intact. Stoics don't do that. They understand that words cannot capture the full depth of experience. Some things can only be expressed through action repeated daily, in silence. Not everyone will understand your silence. Many will assume you have no plan. Some will doubt your ability to follow through. They may judge you as slow, unambitious, or unremarkable. But you don't need to respond. You don't need to correct them. They don't need to understand. And you don't need to be understood. Because the truth is, if you live to be understood, you will always mold your actions to fit others' expectations. But if you live to fulfill your purpose, you will act even when no one notices, no one approves, no one accompanies you. There is a form of persuasion that doesn't come from words, but from consistency. There is a kind of credibility that is not built on image, but on quiet progress. There is a kind of weight not born of speech, but of what you do repeatedly without applause, without praise. That is the weight of action, and the less said, the heavier it becomes. In the depth of Stoic philosophy, we learn that value lies not in what you declare you'll do, but in what you actually do without declaring it. Nothing lasting is built on a foundation of constant explanation. For those who spend too much time explaining often have too little time left to execute. Those who exhaust themselves defending their decisions often forget their original intent. And those who crave recognition eventually lose themselves in the endless chase for others' approval. But you are different. You don't need to tell. You just need to move. Because the quiet steps you take, repeated day after day, create the loudest echo not in words, but in results. 4. Observe to understand, not to react. In today's world, fast reactions are seen as signs of intelligence, initiative, and sharpness. The one who answers instantly is praised for being quick-witted. The one who comments first is viewed as insightful, but the truth is, fast reactions don't always equal deep understanding. And most of life's profound truths don't come from reacting, but from observing slowly, without judgment, without rushing to conclusions. A Stoic understands that every time you react immediately, you give up the chance to see more clearly. Reaction is instinctive. Observation is intentional. Reaction comes from unchecked emotion. Observation arises from trained reason. Reaction demands speed. Observation requires patience. And that patience is the foundation for any action with true depth. When you choose to observe rather than react, you give yourself a valuable space, the gap between event and decision, between someone's words and your response, between a rising emotion and the action you're about to take. In that space, you hold power. You can choose silence over argument. Choose to understand rather than judge. Choose to wait instead of rushing into a game not meant for you. And that power to choose is what reveals true character. A skilled observer is not swept away by appearances. They don't judge a person by a single act, nor label a situation by a single view. They listen not only to what is said, but also notice what isn't. They observe expressions, eyes, hesitation, silences. Because they know truth often lies between the lines in subtle details the hurried eye misses. And that subtlety allows them to make decisions not out of luck, but from seeing what others overlook. Observation is also how you govern your inner space. When you are not pressured to answer right away, to voice an opinion immediately, you gain time to scan your emotions, examine your beliefs, and ask, why am I reacting? Is it for truth or for ego, for integrity or for fear of appearing weak? In that pause, you can dismantle old reflexes and replace them with wiser, more conscious choices. The one who observes rather than reacts is the one who creates lasting impact. They don't need to raise their voice to be heard. Their sharp silence alone commands attention. Their calm, intense moments signals, this is someone trustworthy. While most of the world is busy reacting from social media to daily life, the observer stands out. Not because they seek attention, but because they don't need it to be present. A great general doesn't win by striking quickly, but by striking at the right time. A skilled negotiator doesn't succeed by speaking more, but by knowing when to stay silent. A true leader earns trust not through strong slogans, but through deep understanding built on sustained observation. And that can't happen if you're always swept up in the crowd's chaotic rhythm. So if you want to live with depth, learn to pause before responding. Allow yourself the space to observe without speaking. Remember, you don't need to join every debate, weigh in on every matter, or react immediately to prove you exist. Sometimes, the strongest display of awareness is saying nothing at all, just seeing, listening, registering, and when the time is right, acting with the calm of one who knows exactly what is worth speaking for and what must be kept in silence as part of unshakable inner strength. 5. Not all silence is the same. On the surface, silence may look the same. Not speaking, not responding, not participating in the stream of noise around us, but beneath it lie vastly different worlds. There is the silence of fear, of avoidance, of an unwillingness to face reality, and there is the silence of observation, of preparation, of inner strength being sharpened. Without discernment, it's easy to confuse these two opposing states and misjudge ourselves or others. Silence, born of weakness, often carries a sense of passivity, anxiety, and a longing to be accepted without the courage to express it. Those who remain silent in this way often do so because they fear rejection, fear being wrong, fear being misunderstood, so they withdraw from the game. They don't speak because they don't believe their voice holds value. They don't engage because they assume they can't compete. They let others lead, let circumstances dictate, then convince themselves that their silence is wise. But in truth, that is a distorted silence, a mask for unresolved insecurity. In contrast, the silence that stems from strength is entirely different. It isn't a lack of voice, but a deliberate choice of when to speak. It's not retreat, it's strategic pause. Those who remain silent in this state are not ruled by fear, but guided by understanding. They know that words are not always necessary. They understand that sometimes speech only adds confusion, and they are strong enough to accept not being noticed, not being praised, not having to explain themselves, simply to preserve clarity and a steady path forward. The difference between these two forms of silence lies in their origin. One is born of helplessness, the other of mastery. One causes you to shrink back in fear. The other sharpens your focus and propels you forward. One makes you obsessed with how others see you. The other frees you from needing external validation. That's why, before choosing silence, you must ask, why am I silent? Am I avoiding, or am I preparing? Am I afraid, or am I observing? The honesty of your answer will be the first step in turning silence from a reflex into a conscious strategy. In practice, many people carry great potential but bury it under the wrong kind of silence. They don't share ideas for fear of being judged. They won't step outside their comfort zone because they think they're not good enough. They remain silent, not to listen, but to avoid getting hurt. And in doing so, they're not protecting their strength, they're suffocating their growth. Stoicism doesn't promote shrinking into that kind of silence. It calls you to face the world with courage, yet teaches that not all speaking is brave, and not all silence is cowardice. A Stoic understands that silence only holds value when paired with awareness. They remain silent when a reaction would worsen the situation. They stay quiet to observe a little more, to listen a little longer, and to wait until their mind is clear enough to respond wisely. That kind of silence is part of a strategy, a way to conserve energy, to read the situation, and when the time comes, to act with precision that catches others off guard. In the end, silence is not valuable because it's beautiful, but because it reflects a conscious choice. When you know why you are silent, you no longer fear being misunderstood, no longer crave attention, no longer strain to appear a certain way. You're simply preparing, maturing, diving deeper within before stepping out stronger. And that kind of silence, built from inner strength, gives your actions 10 times the weight of your words. You won't have to say much, because when you do speak, the whole room will stop to listen. 6. Inner order creates outer influence. When you walk into a room, you'll notice something interesting. The person listened to most isn't always the loudest, the most dressed up, or the one in the spotlight. Often, it's the quiet one who radiates a steady, unmistakable energy. They don't try to impress. They don't signal a need for respect. They simply show up with the grounded presence of someone who knows who they are, why they're here, and needs no external validation to feel complete. That is the natural result of inner order, something invisible to the eye, but felt by all. Inner order is a state where the mind is no longer chaotic from inner conflict, no longer pulled by invisible anxieties, and no longer swayed by praise or criticism. It's when you can sit still and not be restless. It's when you can act without needing recognition. It's when you can listen without feeling the urge to reply. When your inner world is in order, everything you do carries a sense of coherence, confidence, and calm. Others may not say it out loud, but they'll feel your presence like a subtle, steady force. You don't need to raise your voice or push your way forward. People naturally turn toward you when you speak. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "First, be master of yourself before seeking to influence the world." That quote reflects a profound principle. You can't offer clarity if you're unclear within. You can't offer calm if your mind is in turmoil. And you certainly can't inspire others if your inner world is breaking apart from battles you haven't faced. Inner order is not a destination. It is a habit cultivated daily through self-observation, mental discipline, and emotional integrity. Those with inner order don't act on fleeting emotion. They don't let anger shape their words. They don't lash back when criticized. They don't rush to speak without understanding. They know that every impulsive reaction is a surrender of control, and every time they pause, observe, and respond from stillness, they reclaim sovereignty over themselves. That's where true influence begins, not from controlling others, but from not being controlled by anything outside of you. In a world full of noise, those with inner stability become anchors. They are like a compass in stormy seas. When others are swept away by emotion, drama, information overload, and pressure to perform, these people stand firm in the posture of the observer, unmoved by wind, unbroken by storm. And it is precisely that stillness that becomes a refuge for others. People don't come to you because you have answers to everything, but because you don't overreact to anything. They look at you and feel something the world is starving for: stability. Inner order also preserves your integrity in action. You're not easily swayed by trends. You're not moved by temporary consensus. You know what matters to you, and don't let passing temptations pull you off course. A person with clarity within will do the right thing even when no one is watching, and stand by their values even when the crowd turns away. That is the deepest form of influence, not in making others follow, but in living as silent proof that thought and action can be one. 7. Turning inward is the beginning of awareness. We're often taught to observe the world around us, to analyze others' behavior, to read opponents, to spot trends. But rarely does anyone teach us how to look within. As a result, we become skilled at reading others, yet unfamiliar with our own inner world. We react quickly to external signals, but remain blind to our internal shifts. Yet every genuine awakening, every right action, every trustworthy decision all begin at the same place: returning inward. Turning inward doesn't mean shutting yourself off or disconnecting from the world. It isn't about avoiding people or escaping reality. It simply means choosing to look deep within before looking outward. Choosing to listen to your mind before paying attention to others' words. Choosing to examine your emotions, beliefs, and motives before acting. Because if you don't understand what drives you from within, chances are you'll become a puppet to external forces, swayed by praise, crushed by criticism, distracted by things that don't belong to you, yet control you daily. The Stoic understands that turning inward is a space for reconstruction. It's where you re-examine why you're doing what you're doing. It's where you peel away emotional layers that hide the truth. It's where you can be honest with yourself without needing defenses, without playing roles, without proving anything. In the silence of the inner world, you begin to hear what the outer noise has long drowned out: your true desires, unnamed fears, and the self-imposed limits you never realized were there. Turning inward is not a glamorous path. It has no spotlight, no applause, no public validation, but it's where the truly strong are forged. They don't chase awakening by running around collecting every self-help tool. They don't rush to change behaviors before understanding the root of the issue. They know that to change the outer world, you must first reset the inner world. And the first step to that is to sit still, face what's within, listen deeply, and resist the urge to run when truth begins to emerge. Facing yourself has never been easy. In the quiet, you'll encounter the dark corners you've long ignored. You'll revisit memories that sting, words you once spoke but never forgave yourself for, choices you justified as right at the time. Yet deep down, you know you chose ease over what was right. That's why most people avoid turning inward. It demands that you remove the mask, drop the armor, and answer questions no one else can answer for you. But if you're brave enough to move through that discomfort, you'll find something no book can give, no lecture can teach. Clarity. You'll realize you don't need to live by someone else's script. You'll discover what truly matters to you, who you really want to become, and why you've been stuck. You'll begin to make choices not based on passing emotions or group influence, but from an inner anchor, one not easily shaken. And from that clarity, you start living with purpose, direction, and depth. Turning inward is the foundation of awareness, because you can't change what you haven't acknowledged. You can't overcome what you're still avoiding. And you can't build a trustworthy life if you've never learned to trust yourself. The journey back inside is never comfortable, but it's where you reconnect with your true nature, not distorted by expectations, not dimmed by achievements, not drowned by noise. It's where you stop explaining who you are and start showing up as yourself. 8. A long-term strategy in a short-term world. We live in an age where everything moves at lightning speed. News changes by the hour, trends evolve daily, and personal value seems defined by how fast you respond, how present you are, and how well you keep up. In that rush, patience feels outdated, quiet is mistaken for stagnation, and the slow building of something lasting is seen as a lack of ambition. But what most people don't realize is this: that very haste is eroding their depth, vision, and true capacity. And so, silence becomes a strategy not to stand still, but to go farther. The Stoic doesn't race against speed. They choose to move slowly, to move surely. They choose to lay the foundation before raising the structure. They know that every lasting value requires time to form, consistency to endure, and discipline to resist short-term temptation. In a world obsessed with instant results, they choose the process. In a society that glorifies obvious success, they value quiet progress. And in an era that urges you to perform, they work silently with total focus, not for show, but out of respect for the path they've chosen. A long-term strategy isn't flashy. It doesn't create immediate noise. It doesn't bring instant recognition, but it delivers something no praise can replace: stability. When you build something in silence, you gain time to adjust, to learn, to fail privately without fear of judgment. You're not pressured to maintain an image, not driven by the crowd's expectations, and not chasing short-lived achievements just to stay visible. You act because it's right. You advance because you're ready. And when the result arrives, it needs no introduction. Its quality speaks for itself. In a hurried world, the patient hold an advantage. Not because they're slow, but because they're unhurried. Not because they're passive, but because they've actively removed distractions. They refine, simplify, go deep instead of wide, and do each task with focus enough to make it meaningful. They don't let their lives be steered by what's trending, but by what holds real value to them. And because of that, they don't just live differently. They live more deeply, more intentionally, and most of all with the power to see things through. I used to believe I had to always speak up, to share every plan and every bit of progress to prove I was on the right path. But over time, I realized the more I talked, the more I lost focus. The more I announced, the more unnecessary pressure I created for myself. And worse, I began acting for others' approval instead of my own purpose. Silence didn't come to me immediately. It was the result of repeated disappointment, self-reflection, and adjustment. From there, I learned to keep my intentions to myself, not out of fear of failure, but to protect my motivation and preserve clarity in thought. And when I truly embraced silence, I found my mind grew quieter, my actions became sharper, and I was no longer swept up in the noise that surrounded me. If something in these words resonated with you, hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next reflection. Remember, sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is not to speak more, but to guard your inner silence and let your actions speak for you. See you in the next video.